Good afternoon and welcome to all delegates who have joined us for our next session, to all delegates who have joined us for our next session, the Trend Forecast Womenswear 2021. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Nicola Cooper, who is the Trend Analyst for All Fashion Sourcing 2020. Nicola is such an engaging speaker, and for all of you who have joined today, it's going to be a treat. As an introduction, Nicola is the founder. She's a trend researcher, analyst, and cultural strategist for Nicola Cooper and Associates. She's a self-confessed information junkie. She's a teacher, speaker, brand consultant, and is a formidable presence on Africa's fashion and lifestyle landscape. It really is a pleasure to have you today, Nicola, and over the next few days as we put together a really good content session for All Fashion Sourcing 2020. And on that note, Nicola, over to you.
So I think before we go into women's wear trends, I'm just going to take you through sort of what I'm going to be touching on today. Obviously, just for context, for those who don't know about trends, I'm just going to give a short introduction into that. Then, of course, the impact of COVID-19 in the fashion world, and then the relevant lifestyle trends that either were sort of manifesting before 2020 or have manifested as a result of 2020. And then we're just going to go and flick through some color print and silhouette standouts for 2021. So I think what is the most important thing is that when we look at trends, you know, I'm such a firm believer that trends do not live in isolation. It's really just a garment hanging on a sort of display. I think fashion and trend forecasting is really the prediction of mood, behavior, and buying habits of the consumer at a particular time or season. So I think it's really important to understand that it's no longer a question of finding your market or finding your consumer by age, geography or income or all of those kinds of facets, but looking into, you know, what they buy into in terms of their culture, their moods, their beliefs, their occasion, and of course the sort of geographic locations and what business impacts that. So I think, you know, when we're looking at trends, we're not just looking at a garment, we're looking at an entire sort of subset of cultures and beliefs and aspirations, which are completely fascinating. Obviously with 2020 and COVID-19 and how the disruption of COVID-19 really sort of impacted our fashion industry. So some of the insights from COVID-19 and fashion and how it has impacted fashion moving forward into 2021 is the rise of e-commerce and m-commerce. So for those who don't know, m-commerce is mobile commerce, and a lot of people are shifting more to mobile commerce, especially here on the African continent, where we are sort of a mobile dependent continent. We have the largest sort of mobile market in the world, and so we're very, very connected via our mobile phones. Then, of course, the availability of sales platforms and distribution centers, the shifts in fashion style, shape, and product. And of course, the alteration in media and media consumption, because media has shifted quite dramatically as well. And then, of course, the shifts in marketing and the potential for local manufacturing for local and global markets. As you know, manufacturing was greatly disrupted as a result of COVID-19, and many of the suppliers accessing Chinese or Asian manufacturers. So I think we're starting to see a shift in dynamic into not placing manufacturing completely at one sort of geographical location and sort of minimizing the risks by distributing them in other spaces. So I think some of the lifestyle and fashion trends that have come as a result of this is I mean, you can see me here with sort of my blurry background via Zoom, and the very fact that you can see me sort of from just the top up. And I mean, I made a little bit of a joke on social media earlier. I said, you know, I'm getting ready for a pre-record of a webinar, but I'm wearing pants. And I think that's really what brings me to the sort of notion of design digital, is the very fact that you are seeing me from here. So when we look at it, you know, our digital or our connection from COVID has resulted in, you know, screen time. And what that means is that we're looking at elements where, you know, in terms of accessories, it might be earrings or, you know, above sort of the waist, and how we can accentuate that with colors or patterns in order to stand out on screen. So it's really so interesting, you know, when you're looking at sort of the gaming spaces, and then of course this new realm of working digitally, and how that has just impacted on fashion. Then of course, as you know, we all have them, or many of them, and just the increase of the global disposable face mask market, and how, you know, we've just adapted to having a mask in our handbag, and in some cases something that expresses our personality or our fashion sense. And I think that as you know, that face masks are definitely not going away for a very, very long time. Not only in terms of engaging one-on-one, and obviously as that lessens, it will still be your sort of go-to when you travel, and especially to foreign countries where your immune system is a little bit more susceptible, you know, to outside sort of airborne diseases. So I think it's going to become quite a firm staple as a travel item, and then engaging for those of us who travel quite frequently, or attending events, or even, you know, commuting to work. So I think we've got to look at this market as almost not just an immediate sort of knee-jerk reaction and response to COVID-19 and sort of the phases and sort of rules and laws around it, but I think as something that is going to continue. And how do we make that as fashionable and, you know, sort of in line with our consumers at the same time? So as I speak about that, I'm also just going to go into the Moschino Spring Summer 2021, and it was as a result of COVID, our designers had to get really, really creative, and this is what I'm loving sort of coming out of COVID-19. And how do you show fashion from a digital space? And as you know, we're busy presenting this digitally to you, when it's usually, you know, a space engaged with a lot of traders and suppliers. So I think what we're starting to see is a major shift in how do we think and how do we creatively problem solve. And I think Moschino really attacked it so beautifully, where they utilized marionettes to articulate the clothing. So these mini versions of models, and it was just something that was just not done in terms of how the fashion industry was engaging with fashion. But it really showed how, if you're thinking a little bit left and out the box, how you can just really grab the attention. And then, of course, when we look at the impact of COVID, we also have to understand the kind of seismic shifts that are being made now as a result of 2021. And I think 2020, it will really, really define the future of fashion. And I think this is an incredibly pivotal year for all sort of facets of the fashion industry, whether it be supplier or media or design, or just engaging with the world and the sort of shifts in consumers. I think for myself and my team in the trends world, we kind of have never been busier as a result of COVID-19. And I think that's because people have to quickly shift their mindset and adapt their strategy and their business to this sort of global catastrophe and what that's doing to people in an everyday perspective. So I think your consumption habits and your consumers' consumption habits are changing. And we also see how that's even changing the clothes we wear. So wellness, comfort, all of these kinds of facets are becoming more and more important. And it was so unusual because I was speaking to a client around a lingerie campaign which they're hoping to articulate in 2021. And I think my conversation to them was, well, I think we've got a bit of a problem because you do understand that most of our consumers have not worn bras in almost a year. It's going to be a really difficult thing to get them back into wearing bras. And I think even the communication around lingerie has to be around comfort as well as decadence or desirability. So it's interesting to see how this trickles into 2021 and how we're starting to think of 2021 campaigns and how they can be impacted by our ladies not wearing bras for 9 months. In the same respect, health is really catapulted to the list of priorities, obviously for obvious reasons, because our health has been at risk and we've really become hyper aware of the vulnerability and humanities of our consumers and of essential workers and people. So I think health and being sort of hyper vigilant and hyper aware has really trickled into so many facets of consumption, but of course that obviously trickles into fashion. So healing materials, so a lot of sort of innovations around CBD, compression, recovery wear. We all know that sort of during the COVID-19, a lot of us were battling to sleep. So how heightened slumber and how slumber has become more important. How do you look at restorative fitness and how do you rest yourself when you feel with anxiety and under tremendous amounts of pressure? This is going into, you know, soft clothing and sort of thermo-regulating fabrics and weighted styles in the same way as we've seen weighted blankets sort of come into space. Now the clothing itself is becoming weighted, as well as bath leisure, which is kind of your fitness to your lounge to your slouch, and meaning like looking at the kind of athleisure trends that we've seen emerging over the past sort of 10 years and how that's going into, you know, fabrics and styles such as toweling and waffle wear, and how this is really translating into things that make us feel good, but also things that lessen anxiety, things that make us feel safe. So it's really interesting to see. It's not only in terms of the silhouettes, but also in the fabrication and what that means to our consumers. Of course, this takes us to obvious sort of spaces because as a result of COVID-19, we are hyper aware of our impact on nature, and as a result this is impacting every facet. So a major trend is back to nature, and that's something that we look at in terms of not only the craft and nature as a form of expression, but also around, you know, conscious consumerism and sustainability and sort of our footprints and how clothing and the purchasing of clothing and the impact of fast fashion on the industry and what that's having. So we're seeing quite a dramatic shift in terms of not only consumers shifting in their mindset, but the pressure that consumers are placing on manufacturers and brands to be hyper aware of waste and sustainability and footprint. So I think what we're seeing is a consistent continuation that's going to go through into 2021, where there's a focus on durability, versatility, and longevity. And that's really around, you know, the idea of buying better and not buying more. So when we look at, you know, structured garments and oversized garments, we're also seeing that through the textiles and prints, that we also highlighting the natural world. So it's a very, very interesting space, and also a shift back to sort of slow fashion and handcrafted knitwears and embroideries and things like that, that come as a result of people having time. But how this is articulating into fabrication, breathable linen, odor repellent performance mesh, moisture winking fabrics, sustainably sourced cotton, recovery compression textiles for athletic wear, and CBD infused textiles. So, I mean, it's quite dramatic, the shift that we've made and what's really trending at this time as a result of us not only wanting to care for ourselves and the environment, but also how clothing becomes an integral part of that. So also looking at, you know, a trend driver, which has been obviously the catalyst for that is people across the globe being confined to their homes. So once the quarantine period is over, I think its legacy will have a lasting, or will have a dramatic impact. I think that some things will revert back to normal, but some things are never going back to normal. And I think we have to understand that there's a new normal at play as a result of COVID-19. So I think considered comfort, when we look at clothing, something that can transcend from, you know, being at home and living, but also something that can shift into work through adjustments and additives or anything like that. And around the versatility and sort of multitasking that we all kind of do. Then, of course, the stay indoors wardrobe and how that sort of inspires elevated basics that are both practical and stylish. And you would have seen a lot of designers quickly sort of shifting and allowing loungewear to become a part of their product offering. And these kinds of things, because people were housebound, but simultaneously they would be working as well as engaging on online meetings. And I think that will also sort of shift as a result of people working from home and maybe not going back to the office full time. So I think you have to adapt between these shifts of someone popping into the office for a meeting or being there 2-3 days a week and being at home the rest of the time. So I think there's a lot of consideration that has to come into what we are going to be providing for 2021. And then, of course, something that we refer to as the 2-mile suit. So that means like something that you can wear within 2-mile radius of your home. So it's you can formalize it, but it's got to be comfortable as well as really looking good. And then, of course, sort of the rise, and this is something we've been observing across sort of industries, the rise in slippers and sliders and, you know, just footwear that you can put on quickly and it looks great, but then it's equally as comfortable to sort of wear at home. I kind of say that as I'm wearing slippers myself, as I'm speaking, and yes, to my point earlier, I do have pants on, but also looking at, you know, how enforced isolation is really looking at sort of minimalism and considered consumption and, you know, future-focused product requirements, and then around the flexibility and versatility and the idea of products being worn for a multiple of reasons. So I'm going to just give you a snapshot into the near future, which is 2025, as we are sort of going into 2021. And I think there's really some key points here which we have to take into consideration. One is that brands are having to prioritize people and the planet over profitability. And I think, you know, when we're looking at that, what that means is that brands are having to shift to sustainable models or products that are going to last longer, which means they're going to sell less. And I don't mean from the immediate perspective, but I mean long-term perspective, which means that a lot of brands are having to shift their product offering and diversify their product offering, especially if we're building things to last. So where you used to maybe sell this categorization, now what we're starting to see is if that person is not buying it in a shorter increment, then we have to find something else to offer our consumer, or we're going to sort of face a loss of income and turnover. So also around, you know, ethical businesses and, you know, purposefulness and business philosophy. We've seen this a lot through sort of Black Lives Matter and drawing attention to Black Lives Matter. And what that means is that people are demanding of their brands to take a stance. They're demanding of their brands not only to take a stance in media, but also behind the scenes. So yes, you posted a black square. What does that mean? Do you have a diverse board table? Am I being represented? If I'm not being represented, I have a problem with this and I cannot support you. So I think what we're starting to see, as I mentioned earlier, it's not just the end product, it's really through the line. People are demanding transparency, and you are having to offer that to them, or you are losing them as consumers. But I think one of the most exciting spaces, and I think from an African perspective, because our luxury market is growing year on year, is that luxurious goods market is growing more because consumers are purchasing more sustainable and, of course, quality items. So what this means is that, you know, our consumers are also willing to pay that little bit more to know that it is taken care of. And I think this is, you know, it's through the line in a manner, because this is elevating the slow fashion movement and sort of luxury versus fast, but I think equally so in fast fashion, when you see the Zara's and H&M's having to shift to a sustainable model because consumers are demanding it. So even at that level of a fast fashion, your consumers are becoming more cognizant. So even though we've got your consumers that will purchase on a luxury level because this is what they can afford, even at your fast fashion and affordable fashion retail, you're starting to see that shift. Then, of course, looking at sort of 10 years from now, how this is going to sort of unfold is that consumers are embracing creative, artisanal values and genuine quality and durability products. So this also came as a result of us sort of being stuck at home and starting to figure out, you know, how we can be creative and how that, what that means, and how, you know, what goes into a loaf of bread, or as everyone knows, what it went into banana bread, and how we can make it sort of our own. But I think that this is translating into fashion itself, and how craftsmanship again has been elevated, and durability and quality. And I think one of the sort of really important facets to remember, that even in an economic downturn, even in sort of recessions, people are more prone to either buying up in terms of quality items. So you think a coat or a pair of shoes, because they want them to last longer and have durability. Or either they're looking in terms of affordable retail of those retailers that offer quality and durable products, because what we need is for them to last longer because of the impact that it's had on our consumers' pockets. So I think there's a number of different facets, from both sort of looking at luxury goods to sort of fast and affordable retail. And then, of course, the idea of slowness. We've all legitimately had to slow down, and I think that's really caused time to pause and consider what we really value. And I think in this going forward, many of us are sort of realizing through our closet clean outs during lockdown, we have so much stuff and we sort of bombarded, and we're really just getting rid of things that are weighing us down. And I think that's really important when we're looking at consumers, because they're likely to purchase sort of higher or sort of align their purses to slowness, because it means quality, it means durability, and now they understand the importance of slowness. So it's not as much as how we've seen the fashion industry, where it's been like, I've seen it on the runway, I want it, it's immediate. I think we're starting to see, you know, in terms of sustainability and just our mind shift, is that, you know what, I'll wait for it. I'll wait until I can afford it properly, or until it lands, and I'll just save my pennies until I get there. Then, of course, the idea of decadence and what that means. And what we're starting to see is, I mean, we obviously not just dressing to go out, to go to restaurants or anything like that at present. So we're seeing sort of a shift to what we refer to as everyday decadence. So all dressed up and nowhere to go. And the idea of, you know, how you can be decadent at home. And I think this is through luxury loungewears or fabrication and softness. I think we've got to understand that decadence is almost an act of self-care, and that stay home style is going to go straight through to purchasing. And even once COVID and once we've sort of gone back to life as normal, we're becoming accustomed to wearing comfortable clothing, soft clothing, sneakers, and we're going to see such a shift to more people adapting to what was athleisure or minimal sportswear or anything like that. Then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, the design for digital. So when we look at, you know, sort of my face here, what fashion items are we contributing? I think accessories are going to play key. Earrings, hair accessories, necklaces, obviously scarves in winter. And I think we're going to start seeing a lot of detailing around the neck and sort of frilling and playing this sort of level up. So I think we're going to start seeing a lot of decadence or a lot of embellishment, sort of, as I mentioned earlier, sort of above the waist. And then, of course, for those of us who have, you know, sort of the need to exercise, the idea of, you know, the surge of workouts that we were doing during lockdown, and at-home workouts, and sort of the investments around what we could do at home. And a lot of that included just yoga and things that you didn't need equipment for. And I think a lot of people that were slow to enter that kind of yoga, Pilates, home workouts are starting to realize that they can do it. And I think that this is really manifested into a number of product categories as well as industries, seeing a surge in sort of workout clothing, and what that means for the industry, and how people want to sort of embrace home workouts. So even from the accessories, you know, sort of the weights and things like that, to people purchasing items that can actually, they can work out in and simultaneously work or go to a meeting in. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, sustainability. And I think when we look at sustainability, it's really important to understand that, a lot of the positioning around sustainability has been around the manufacturing aspect of sustainability, and where the items are sourced, but also who is making these items. Are they being ethically made? But I think a lot of consideration needs to be taken in terms of what sustainability means for markets or industries in different countries that have been impacted by COVID-19. In South Africa, we've seen a large surge in people buying local from local designers and local retailers, because they understand the people behind the brand and the people that they employ. So I think it's not just around how it's manufactured or what it's manufactured with, or even who it's manufactured by. It's also around, is it going to support our economy? Is it going to support our environment? Is it going to support a community? These are really important things that your consumers are very aware of at the moment. And I think that really is such a great opportunity for smaller brands and sort of localized brands globally to start selling to their own consumers. And I think that's really, really exciting space to play in. And then again, as I mentioned, people are redefining value through the impact of their purchases and what they have on the world. So it's not just around, is this of value to me? Am I getting value for my money? But what does this mean? Like, what is the long term? What is the inverted commas, the true cost of this? So when we look at secondhand items, we've seen such a dramatic surge in sort of thrifting, and very much so. I mean, thrifting is part of our culture in Africa, but thrifting, even sort of resale of luxury items and luxury goods, because more and more people are conscious of their value and what that means to a market. And what we're starting to see is such a shift. And I think that's going to create really exciting spaces for resale and repurposing and all these kinds of facets, and that's really for a number of different reasons, but a lot of people wanting less stuff and then wanting to purchase stuff that is a little bit more in tune with their sort of aspirations for future. So I just wanted to show you the sort of Caterpillar new campaign, and it's quite interesting the dynamic that they've taken and how they're sort of positioning to a younger consumer, but around the lifestyle and how it means to be living in a brand rather than just looking in a brand. And I think this is really important, and key messaging around it doesn't really just have to look good. It's got to be a part of your life and an extension of yourself. So obviously, as a result of that, and as a result of what I mentioned earlier around sustainability and localization, I think there's really an important aspect of helping and supporting one another and building a future of possibilities that's taken on a new significance of broader appeal. And it's something that we've been saying in South Africa for a number of years is, our retailers, given the opportunity to make it faster and cheaper, exited the African geographical boundaries, and as a result, were manufacturing in Asian countries. But also what we're starting to see, as a result of COVID is the bringing back of manufacturing within the country, and a number of larger retailers in South Africa are starting to do so, but not only to supply to local retail, but also for export. I think that a lot of manufacturers are looking at the African continent, one, because we have space to build factories. We also have a workforce, and of course our rand dollar or our rand euro or rand pound exchange makes it affordable labor. And so I think and obviously because we have a number of harbors and things like that, we're starting to look into different countries who are similar to Africa in terms of manufacturing. So, and again, I mean, that's around minimizing the risk of manufacturing solely in an Asian country. If we diversify our manufacturing, then if something happens again, which is kind of inevitable, then we don't all have our sort of eggs in one basket. So I think, as I mentioned, that products are no longer just products, and in our trends, and what I've been saying sort of the past 20 years of my career is it really isn't just about products, and we've seen it become more and more about trusting brands and what brands are saying, how they're using their platforms, and how they're creating garments. Are they representing correctly? Are they being inclusive? Is it affordable? And we really, really holding brands accountable for their actions. And I think, a number of years ago, I was a little alarmed when I was in a meeting and someone said, well, we don't really care about the consumers. And I think, that's really stuck with me. And I thought at that time, and it was easy 5 years ago, how sort of tone deaf that was. And I almost want to revisit that conversation, because now it's more about consumers than it ever has been. And I think that that's really what we have to understand. And around that, we know that fashion and clothing is around identity. It's around not only who we are, it's around who we want to be, it's how we want to represent ourselves. And it's usually accessible forms of expression and sort of creative licensing. So I think what we're starting to see, and it's very important to say this in a Womenswear report, that gender and gender archetypes have been challenged over years and years, and now we're starting to see almost the next generations, the Gen Zs and the Gen Alpha, and what that means for those who have been sort of brought up deconstructing that gender archetype, and what that means for the fashion industry, and what sort of possibilities that can lend itself. So I think what we're starting to see is these kinds of fluidities and translations between male and female, and what it means to be male or female. And I think that that's a really exciting space to explore around fluidity and identity formation, which is really, really important. So, speaking about gender fluidity and then going into femininity is a little ironic, but I think that, there is an embracing and sort of owning of gender or sexuality, or even owning the fluidity of it. And I think that what we're starting to see as a result of that is the increase of feminized or feminine silhouettes and detailings and things like that. So, ruffles and pinks and very exaggerated shoulders and ties and ribbons and volume, things like that we haven't seen in quite a while, where women were adopting athleisure, and they were adopting almost a masculine perspective, and masculine trends were impacting dramatically on feminine trends. And now we're seeing the absolute reverse, where we're seeing this ease of being female and in embracing of being female, or embracing of those who identify as female. And as you know, we're seeing a lot of men wearing dresses, wearing clothing that's overtly feminine. And I think it's an interesting space that we really got to keep our eye on for the future. So as I said, you know, the femininity of this is also as a result of above the keyboard dressing. What that means, it's the necks, it's the sleeves, and all of those kinds of elements that focuses on sort of the top half of the body, so necklines and design details, while you can sort of have this beautiful articulation, but at the same time it has to be comfortable. So I think with all of those sort of lifestyle trends that are kind of thrown in at you, I'm now going to just sort of break it down into some of the key trending colors, as well as patterns that are sort of transcending into 2021. And you can see how these different lifestyle trends obviously impact in the application now. So when we're looking at trends for color trends for 2021, we're seeing color like we have never seen it before. And I think this is around the obvious optimism that we need, and the idea of, you know, just enjoying life. I think a lot of us have really identified how short life is. I mean, a lot of people have passed as a result of COVID, and we really are aware of our family and our loved ones and our own lives and what our lives mean. So I think there's such a dramatic impact of that into sort of embracing life, enjoying life, and what that means in terms of color. So when we look at some of the spring-summer 2021 ranges, we're starting just to see how the idea of color, whether it be embracing bold colors or embracing natural colors out of respect for this new awareness and sort of vulnerability of nature and our kind of consciousness around purchasing. So we're starting to see a really exciting space. So this is from Designal, it is the Spring Summer 2021, and I think you will see the translation not only in terms of the bold colors, but obviously in my reference to gender fluidity as well. So when we're looking at these colors, I mean, the idea of beautiful, bold sort of articulations from beetroot and these kinds of natural sort of tones that we're now consuming in our food has now sort of reached the runway, reached streetwear, and these are beautiful, bold colors. And specifically for us on the African continent, where they look beautiful against darker skin tones, but equally so the different sort of tints and tones on lighter sort of complexions. So it's a really interesting space to kind of play with these beautiful bold colors, either simplistically or textured. Then polka dots, as I said, you know, when we're looking at sort of above the waist, we're starting to see a lot of print and pattern come into play. So a more demure articulation of that is polka dots. But what we're starting to see is the different sizing and the combination of different sizes playing up this kind of classical, almost vintagey aspect, and how this can be articulated for 2021. And then what we're seeing is, you know, bright white, and specifically, you know, in warmer climates, what that means in terms of keeping us cool, and the amazing textures and sort of nuances that you can get from laser cutting to sort of this kind of macrame application and knitwear. So it's really beautiful how you can play with these different sort of textures, but at the same time, just simply playing around with your linens and those kinds of key fabrications that just translate well into warmer climates and the summer seasons. Then as a result, we're also seeing a lot of print and pattern. We're seeing a lot of this on runway, kind of an homage to obviously Africa and kind of the drivers of African trends that are happening right now, and what that means in terms of these kind of clashes that we have, and how we're seeing the combination of pattern clashes from a tie-dye with a wax print, and the combination of that to create really, really fun and unique pieces for spring and summer 2021. Then this beautiful biscuit green, which is coming into play for 2021. There are so many sort of tints and tones and applications of it. You know, there's kinds of bolder versions, but also the luxurious applications in terms of your silk, and then also how we can just tie it in terms of sort of color blocking, or even in terms of translucent fabrications. So there's a number of different applications of this that's just going to carry through to many sort of facets of products and availabilities within retail. Then a strong push to chive, and this is really as a result of kind of the functionality of safari wear or cargos and those kinds of things, mini pockets, and just how you can sort of take it down and pair it into the basics by just having a cargo, but then also elevating it into a space of these leather looks, which are really strong for summer, and as well as kind of your silk and your chiffons and things like that. So there's also quite a number of different applications we can play into with this beautiful and diverse tone. Then, you know, when you're looking at colors and what we've been seeing on the runways, we're seeing a lot of yellows coming through, and I think this is generally around summer. As I mean, inevitably summer is about sun, but I think it's also around optimism and playing around with these kinds of nude aspects of yellow. So playing into that nude space, which we've been seeing trend for a number of years, but at the same time, it's got that sort of sunny quality to it. Then, of course, J.Lo wearing her updated version of her infamous Versace dress was really, I mean, it blew everyone away. And as a result of that, we've seen, you know, these kinds of tropical prints, these bright, bold colors, these sort of luminous, neon-esque colors coming through. But even in terms of accessories, or what you can see is those kinds of shot fabrics where they've got a bit of a sheen and change with the color, with the lights, and how it just gives a youthful and really contemporary quality to kind of a sort of 90s and 80s trend. So how we're seeing that revisited in 2021. And even, you know, some of the most romantic fashion houses, we've seen these bold colors and these kinds of limes. But I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be in these big bold colors. We're seeing that sort of avocado lime color coming through. And then even sort of the applications around sort of plaids and tie-dyes, and the versatility of this color is incredible. Then, I mean, you know, as I mentioned, we've seen so many yellows coming into play, but there's a really lovely way of playing into the floral nuances and the femininity for summer and what this means, and playing around with the combination of different prints, the combination of these different yellows together, and even contrasting textures when it comes to the application of this. So whether it be sort of overarching prints or layers over prints or even digital cutouts, there's a strong pull to this kind of 60s floral print that we're seeing revisited in 2021. And then this is a result of seeing yellow in every shape and form on the runway, but particularly the strong saffron, which is kind of, you know, your oranges and your nectarine colors, as well as a little bit of a lemon application. So when you look at analytics, 5% of almost all the collections which we've analyzed has had yellow in it in some form of another. And then, as I said earlier, this femininity coming into play, ruffles and bows and sort of textures around the neck and these sleeving details that really we're seeing just elevate and elevate and elevate, whether it be sort of simplistic or layers upon layers or digital cutouts, or even just, you know, the different fabrications laid upon each other. We're starting to see this really come into play. And it's such an interesting way, because a lot of these lines are very clean and very sleek, but with this, just the subtle detail and sort of nod to femininity. And then one of the key colors around this is your dawn pink, which is kind of almost a feminized version of it, going more into the masculine side of a lavender or a dusty pink. And in that way, this kind of color transcends just the female market. It also is dipping into menswear. And obviously, this is a really key color when we're speaking about items for gender fluidity. So either it can be given a very strong suiting shape, or it can be used with the sort of bloussons and the really feminine silhouettes and fabrications. And just to give you an insight into how that's articulating on the runway, you can even see in terms of the styling of this campaign for 2021, how these kinds of billowing and seeing fashion in movement is becoming really important. So filming fashion and making fashion available in the digital space, but not only as a still, but as a moving item. And then going into once we start getting out and what this means, and, you know, just looking at the metallics coming in, whether they just be sort of pops and nuances or overall sheen, we're starting to see it sort of across the board in homeware. We're starting to see a lot of sort of bohemian references. We're seeing a dramatic sort of revert to the 1970s, kind of the world wear that we saw in the 1970s, because everyone was exploring different cultures to their own. And so this richness of, you know, layering and gold threading and these kinds of things were coming through at that time. So when you look at the Yves Saint Laurent of the 1970s, and we look at this kind of shine bright and these ways of chainmail, but also the articulation into paisley prints and kind of simplistic silhouettes that we could have seen in the 1970s, we're seeing a strong pull to that. And it's just such a really luxurious space, especially for evening wear or occasion wear. And as a result of this, the copper skillet color is really going out there, because this is one that is transcending between product categories. You can pair it with animal prints or sort of your new neutrals, as well as wearing it sort of in a high gloss or in volume. It's a really bold color that really articulates across product categories, as well as design categories, but also in terms of you know, the complexions of consumers. It works beautifully on a dark tone, but equally beautifully on a Caucasian fair skin. So I think there's a lot of sort of play that we have in the space that we can really sort of investigate for 2021. And then the coat dress, I think this is a really important one because it's around versatility and how we can make a lightweight coat, which just may be a throw on over jeans and sneakers when you're popping out to the store, but can also be belted and worn out at night with the kind of key accessories. So I think this is around the versatility trend and the adaptability of items, and whether it is, the coat dress or a coat in a leather-esque. As I said, this kind of leather texture is really here for summer, and I think that's really important to understand that, but also just a classic trench and what that means when you belt it. And so accessories around versatility are also equally important. And then really looking at the new nudes, which we've been following for a number of years, and we've seen it sort of go into, Kim Kardashian's sexy skims or her body tight latex and what this has meant, but also around this kind of out of Africa safari-esque versatility of clothing, whether they're just voluminous shapes that keep you cool, or it is a tie detail or any of those kinds of pocketing details that we associate with safari wear or cargo wear, and those kinds of things which really sort of just play into the romanticism of the nature of Africa and what that means now that we're revisiting it with fresh eyes and a newfound respect for nature. So I think, that's a lot of information that I always throw at you. I hope that you've pulled something really, really valuable from this. I just want to thank All Fashion Sourcing for having me again. It's always an honor to present on such a respected platform and now to a global audience, and I thank you for having me. So thank you, Neil, thank you All Fashion Sourcing, and thank you for the team who is making this digitalization realized.